Jimmy Hansen was 8 years old the summer he discovered that the world was bigger than the grown-ups ever let on. Not in the way of maps or oceans or far-off cities, but in the way a child understands big things. The kind of big that lives in the spaces adults forget to look at. The kind of big that hides behind barns, under porches, and down the long slope behind the farmhouse where the grass grows tall and the wind carries secrets. Jimmy was a boy who made his own adventures. He had to. His parents, Cecil and Margaret, were good people, or at least they tried to be. But they were the sort of adults who filled their days with company and conversation and the clink of glasses on silver trays. They loved their son, of course, but they loved their gatherings too. The laughter, the music, the endless parade of neighbors and friends who came to sit on the porch and talk about things Jimmy didn't understand. So Jimmy learned early that the farm was his playground, and what a playground it was. He had a stick he called his sword, a long, knobby branch he'd stripped of bark and carried everywhere. He fought pirates behind the chicken coop, battled invisible monsters in the hayloft, and once declared himself king of the back pasture, which the cows accepted with quiet dignity. He was a boy with a wild imagination and a heart full of stories, and the farm gave him room to let them all out. Down the hill behind the farmhouse, past the blackberry bushes and the old fence that leaned like it had grown tired of standing straight, sat the well. It was older than anyone living could remember, built from stacked stones that had warmed under 1,000 summers. The rim was wide enough for a child to sit on, and Jimmy often did, dangling his legs over the edge and peering into the cool darkness below. The well was famous for its sweet water. Cecil said it was the best water in 3 counties, and Margaret swore it made her tea taste like something from a fancy hotel in the city. Jimmy didn't care about any of that. To him, the well was a pirate's treasure pit, a secret hideout, a place where echoes lived. He'd shout into it and listen to his voice bounce back, laughing every time like it was a brand new trick. Some days, he'd balance on the stones, arms out like wings, pretending the well was the mast of a great ship cutting through stormy seas. He'd shout orders to his imaginary crew, swinging his stick sword at enemies only he could see. The wind would whip around him, tugging at his shirt, and he'd grin like he was the bravest boy in the world. It was on one of those bright golden afternoons, the kind where the sun hangs heavy and the air smells like warm grass, that Jimmy decided he was Captain Hansen, Scourge of the 7 Seas. He marched down the hill with his sword over his shoulder, humming a tune he'd made up on the spot. The grown-ups were on the porch again, laughing at something Cecil had said, their voices drifting faintly on the breeze. Jimmy didn't mind. He had a mission. He climbed onto the well's stone rim, steadying himself with one hand. The stones were warm under his bare feet, smooth from years of weather and use. He raised his sword high, shouting a challenge to the imaginary pirates closing in on him. His voice echoed down into the well, bouncing back in a way that made him laugh. He spun once, twice, the way he always did when he was pretending to fight off a whole ship's worth of enemies. The world blurred in a whirl of sunlight and sky. He felt tall, powerful, unstoppable, the hero of his own story. And then the stones shifted. It was small at first, a tiny scrape, a whisper of movement beneath his feet. Jimmy froze, his arms outstretched, his sword hanging loosely from his hand. He looked down, puzzled, as one of the stones tilted ever so slightly, just enough to break the balance he'd trusted without thinking. There was a moment, a single breath-thin moment, where everything held still. The wind paused, the world quieted. Even the distant laughter from the porch seemed to fade. And then the quiet deepened. Later, people would talk about how strange that afternoon felt. how the air seemed heavier, how the hill behind the house seemed too still, too quiet, like it was holding something it didn't know how to let go of. Cecil would remember calling for Jimmy when the sun dipped low, his voice echoing across the yard with no answer. Margaret would remember the way her heart tightened when she realized she hadn't seen her son since lunchtime. They searched the farm with lanterns, calling his name into the gathering dusk. Neighbors came to help, their voices joining the chorus. The well stood silent at the bottom of the hill, its stones cool now in the evening air. When they found the overturned stick sword lying in the grass, Cecil picked it up with trembling hands. Margaret pressed it to her chest, her breath catching in a way she would never forget. The well was quiet, too quiet. In the days that followed, the farm felt different. Not haunted, not yet, but hollow in a way that settled into the bones of the place. The laughter on the porch faded. The gatherings stopped. Cecil and Margaret moved through the house like shadows, their grief too heavy for words. But the farm remembered Jimmy. It remembered the sound of his footsteps pounding across the yard. It remembered his laughter ringing through the fields. It remembered the way he'd sit on the well's rim, legs swinging, telling stories to the dark water below. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings when the wind is just right, people say you can hear something down by the well. Not a cry, not a whisper. A laugh, soft, light, childlike, as if an 8-year-old boy is still down there somewhere, playing pirates on a ship only he can see. Before he was a ghost, Jimmy Hansen was a child with a wooden sword and a world full of adventures. And Hollow Farm remembers him.